Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host, Jibraj, and today I have with me an extremely special guest. Join me in welcoming the founder of India's leading insurtech startup, Digit Insurance. Thank you so much, Kamesh, for joining me. I'm really delighted and honored to be hosting you today.
Pleasure, Jivraj. Happy to be here.
Great to hear that, Kamesh. And it's incredible what Digit has done in terms of disrupting the entire insurance space of the country. But what's even more incredible is your personal story of how you got started as a founder, despite and with the experience that you had in the industry. Because traditionally, what's been popularized is the young founder who disrupts ecosystems that he or she does not come from. But you came from an ecosystem that you ended up disrupting and continue to with Digit, and with years of experience that you didn't just leverage to the best of, but also utilize and scaled and grew the organization on top of. So, if you can help us understand how you leveraged your experience and how that became an advantage as you started off as the founder that you were when you started up Digit Insurance, I think that would be a great conversation starter.
So, Jivraj, first of all, I think I personally I don't like this disruption word. I think
Okay.
very few people in the world can really disrupt industries.
Mhm.
In the best of my imagination, would not think I'm capable of doing it.
Mhm.
We today have a market share of slightly more than 2%.
Mhm.
So, which basically means we are one of the smaller players today. The
Mhm.
biggest player would be maybe at about 10, 11% in the sector. So I think disruption is a very strong word. I won't use that. I think if you look at a business like insurance, it is more than about 300 years old. And if we look at, say, two, three, maybe three core functions of insurance, one is how do you price a risk? And pricing also means should you accept a risk, should you not accept a risk, and at what price? Then second is when you get claims, how do you settle claims? And then the third is since you get a lot of money from by way of premiums and claims take some time to actually be paid, how do you manage investments? So these really are the three core functions. Now, when we look at the pricing per se, I think this is evolving over the last 300 years. And every time there's a new crisis, and like recently the world is going through this COVID crisis, you always realize that there is always some unknown which you basically never knew about it. And as a science, I think it is both qualitative as well as quantitative. And a lot of times in decision making, people miss out on the fact that we assume we know everything because end of the day, people, youngsters, especially today, and a lot of people even at my age who are smart, they want to put down everything on an Excel sheet or on some sort of a model. And whether it was 2008 financial crisis or it was now relating to COVID, every crisis we realize that models uh, always have their limitations, and end of the day, qualitative judgment helps. Now, in my case, having worked for a long period now, 30 years or 28 years when we started Digit, and having worked in lots of countries in various sort of situations, and obviously also a team, one realizes that I think there is some inherent advantage of this experience and of this exposures in various crises one has gone through. When it comes to claims, and I'll also touch then the piece on technology in the end. When we look at claims, people will get sick, they will have to go to the hospital, vehicles will get into accidents, you'll have to get the vehicles repaired. So you also have to ensure that not only you have to pay customers promptly, but you also have to pay a fair amount. Across the world, I think insurance companies are people actually don't feel it is morally bad to cheat an insurance company. Somehow people have this impression that insurance companies are really stinking rich and taking some money out would not really damage them. So then again, playing with fraud, how to settle claims, and all of that also becomes extremely critical. which again, I think it's a skill which people have in each of these areas. And so what we tried to do in Digit was that we created a team which a mix of youngsters and some experienced people who come with some core insurance skills. And we blended that with people who come from a strong technology background, communications, marketing, uh, analytics, to say what can we use, what is available today with the core insurance skills, and then try and say, can we create some sort of a differentiating play in the market? Uh, and the good thing about our business is nobody has been able to, I would say, develop an algorithm today where you say, okay, this is the car, and you put this into the system, and system will give you a premium rate. Nobody has been able to do that. Similarly, for a claim, no amount of AI or analytics today is in a position to say, okay, these are the photographs or a video, and this is how much you should pay.
Hmm.
So technology has played a very big role in making lives simpler for customers, giving us huge amount of data to work on and make the risk selection more and more granular, and most importantly, to scale up the business. But technology in itself is not really the solution. You have to blend it with other skills,
Mhm.
and including investments. I think we know that insurance companies typically have been good at managing investments,
Yeah.
but some sort of a very aggressive play on investments can also be bad.
Yeah.
So I think it's a question of bringing the old world and the new world in a way together, and be very conscious that there's a lot of stuff you don't know,
Mhm.
and you have to learn every day, and
Yeah.
never take customers or your business partners for granted ever.
Absolutely. I think that's extremely comprehensive in sharing, the old world, the combination and the balance you bring on the table. And I stand corrected. I think instead of disruption, we can use the category creation. You were able to carve out a niche for yourself in a market that seemed cluttered. But interestingly enough, right, while a lot of the things that stem from experience were great, can you also perhaps reflect upon the things that you had to unlearn, leave behind, which were not suitable, which were perhaps suitable for legacy systems, but not suitable for an agile startup that wanted to, build something from scratch? I think because a lot of the reservation around, the new startup culture is that you have to learn everything, unlearn everything, whatnot, right? So if you can speak from experience on that front as to what that learning curve for you looked like when the initial days of Digit, that would be super interesting.
So, Jivraj, as I said, having worked for so long in this industry, one was aware where the customer pain points are.
Sure.
To start with, I think most people, when they get an insurance policy, which could be anywhere from 10 to 40, 50 pages, uh, even if an insurance guy reads it, I'm not sure how many of them will actually be able to figure out what is covered and what is not covered. So the whole product is very complicated.
Hmm.
And people don't really understand this, and then they discover this. People assume or people feel that they discover this fine print at
Yeah.
the time of claim. Second, I think thing which is important is that previously, when technology was not that great in terms of what it is available today,
Mhm.
you had to offer more or less a similar product to various customers, different customers. Today, I think technology offers you the opportunity to customize a product.
Mhm.
So I think that was the second big opportunity. So one can say it's part of unlearning process, but also seeing an opportunity.
Yeah.
And the third thing, which I think, which I felt most strongly, was that insurance companies are somehow not seen as transparent. People
Mhm.
actually don't know what they do,
Yeah.
what's happening to the claims, how much time they take to settle a claim, how things go wrong, how they come out with a new product, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we also try to create simultaneously this positioning on transparency, and we publish every 6 months a transparency report. We also created a dictionary of insurance words so that people can contribute and learn from it. And we also try to make a documents very simple to say, look, this is what is covered, this is what is not covered at the time of claim, this is the document you will have to send. So it's a combination of, I would say, a lot of these things, and this continues. I would not say that we have got everything right or every product has been simplified to the way we want. I think it's a continuous process, and what has really helped us till now, and I hope we can continue on this forever, is that we speak to our customers very regularly. We look at the feedback we are getting, especially on complaints. We talk to our partners, our business partners, on a very regular basis, take feedback from them in terms of through service areas of improvement, and it continuously tells us where we can improve things. I would say that this is more like a journey which continues, and the more we get into this, more we realize that the opportunity is even bigger than we think it was.
Certainly, I think that too is incredible to hear, purely because it emphasizes on the two very important pillars of Digit, which is simplicity and transparency for the consumer. And as a youngster who does not understand much about insurance, I can tell you that that's a huge pain point to solve for consumers. So I can testify on that front. But it's interesting, the multiple things that you mentioned. I'd like to double click on a couple of them. The first of them being, product innovation. So Digit has not just simplified products, but also created and championed some of the most important products in insurance, right? Think of a COVID insurance, for instance. And you have, at the same time, as you also briefly mentioned, failed on certain products, right? You mentioned about the jewelry insurance that did not work out well. What I'm trying to allude to, and maybe what you can refer to in detail, is how do you think about the product innovation cycle within the company, right? Considering that insurance is a difficult product, how do you internally solve for this and try to ensure that you can, ship products, ship innovation, and make innovation as a constant in your company building journey? I think that would be very important, especially considering the complexity around insurance.
So, Jivraj, it's a mix of things. So let me start with jewelry, which, as you said, didn't work, and which was my bright idea. And the thought process was very simple: that India is the largest gold jewelry market in the world. We did a survey, we realized that more than 99% of the people actually have no jewelry insurance. Everyone felt that if such a product is offered in a simple way, though the product was already there, but the way it was offered, etc., was very complex, that they would actually buy this. So that is how we actually came up with this idea, launched a product. It didn't click. We tried, I think, a few things, but finally we realized that maybe no. One of the big reasons we thought was to make the process simple was that people could actually buy insurance when they're buying jewelry, almost at the same time. And what actually our sales colleagues told me when they visited some of the jewelry stores was that people had already spent good amount of time in buying and selection of jewelry, and they didn't want to spend another 10 minutes on anything else. So somehow this didn't click at all. On the other hand, I think this COVID was interesting, that as the early January, if I remember, it was actually January, sometime late January, when this COVID had started coming, and we were launching our health insurance. One of our young colleagues mentioned that why don't we explore doing something on COVID health insurance? I think our team did a great job. We came out and we could actually launch the product, I would say, within a period of 4 weeks from that initial discussion. And I think as we launched the product, then we went through various versions. And then finally, we settled on a product. It took us about 2 more modifications. And then the product clicked. The issue is that last year, 2021, was pretty good, actually, from a COVID claims perspective. Fortunately, we did not see many. And then last year in April, May in 21, COVID was raging in India due to this Delta virus. Every insurance company stopped selling. And that was a time when we had to take a call to say, should we continue to sell or should we not continue to sell? Because the question obviously was that demand is huge. The issue was how much money one could lose, because nobody knows when it's going to end. Yeah. So I would say in cases of product, at times they click and you are happy. At times they click and you are a bit stressed whether you should continue or not.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a mix of, I think our team continuously looks at categories where we see the most number of customer complaints. About 2.5, 3 years back, we had launched a airline ticket cancellation product.
Mhm.
Because if you would visit any travel portal, people continuously complain about very high cancellation fees. So we actually came out with a product on that, which was very complex and very difficult to price because customer behavior changes once you have cancellation insurance, and the cancellation behavior just increases dramatically. So for various products, I would say the opportunity really one hears from business partners, customers, online searches, wherever one sees that, okay, if there is some sort of a pain point of customer, we try and see, can we do something there? Regulator also, I think, at times comes out with new products. I think now they're trying to push a surety insurance kind of a product. They've come out with some guidelines on that. So it's a mix of all. I think the issue is that because out of 10 ideas, 6, 7 outrightly get rejected. Either they are not workable or from our perspective, or it's no real value from a customer perspective. Then 2, 3 products you pick up, and my sense is that typically 1 out of 20 products which you will evaluate, you would actually finally going to get to launch it, and then it will be a success. So the success rate actually is significantly lower than what one initially feels.
Got it. Got it. No, I think that's very interesting to know. And I think my cue there is just keeping at it and staying ahead of the curve. I think that as a DNA really shows throughout your answer. And that's something for every young entrepreneur to take notice of as well. But one thing that has also been a constant in all of your answers till now is listening to the consumer and being extremely centric to the consumer, right? You've spoken a lot about problem solving, understanding the pain point, taking feedback, and you've continuously also, mentioned in multiple conversations in the past about the 4.9 rating on Facebook, 4.7 rating on Google Play. Talk to us about how important this customer obsession is for you as a founder. And secondly, how do you transform that within the organization? Because now Digit is getting big, right? And there can be an easy focus on the micro task, which is to, let's say, do a bunch of things without having a core focus on the consumer. How do you enable this at scale? And what is the thought process within the company when it comes to the consumer? We would love to know that.
So, Jivraj, basically, I try and take a lot of calls from these telecallers, etc. And as a consumer, I also end up calling a lot of call centers and stuff like that. And since last 7, 8 years, I've started observing much more closely, how the customer communication is, what the response rate is, and things like that. And then I happened to read a book by Tony Hsieh, who unfortunately died, about Zappos, and that was just eye-opening in terms of what a customer service, etc. is. So I think when we started Digit, I think all of us here, we felt that we should actually really get differentiated by the service, because insurance industry and typically all services industry, which are a bit traditional, they are not really well known for a good customer service. So we try to design our processes in a way that customer friction is the least. So even for a claim, nobody really has to sign a claim form, send us papers. No, everything can be done digitally, for example. At every stage or every sub process, when did the customer call us for claim? When did we register? When did we appoint a surveyor? No, every sub process is actually monitored and turnaround time looked at on a daily basis. Then people, when we get complaints, then we say, okay, what went wrong in this process? Then that process will get changed. Then people will spend time to say, okay, if we have to make this process faster, how can we use technology, say for reading of documents, for data entry, etc., to make the process significantly faster. And then you encourage customers, to come and write reviews on your website, on your social media pages, and give you rating. Now, I am still very ignorant about social media communications, but I have fortunately very smart colleagues in branding and marketing and communications. And initially, 5 years back, when I said, look, uh, I just tried to figure out, read some reviews on competitors' website, and I realized actually you cannot go as a visitor and write a review there. You can only do a rating because most companies across the world, they block customers from writing because social media is also a lot of bullying and crap today. And I said, no, we will allow our customers to come and write. And a colleague told me at that time that it's good to do that, but be prepared that it will also bring a lot of nuisance. And once you start publishing all this, then there's no going back. So we opened up. I guess we learned that though obviously there is a section of people who try and misuse this, but most of the time the feedback actually when people criticize, I would say the feedback is about processes, etc. And then you realize that there is scope for improvement. So today, I think in Digit, people take a huge amount of, I would say, pride and seriousness with the customer service. And if you read our customer reviews, the reviews are never about Digit. I think most of the reviews, people actually mention name of the person who gave them a good service. And this, I think, recognition also shows that companies as good as the people who really serve. And when we have some people here in our customer care team who get more than like 100 great written reviews in a month.
Wow.
So, and I'm sure these people are inspiring others to do that.
Certainly.
And secondly, if we slip, and it happens, which we also publish in our transparency report, where things don't work out the way you plan them to be, then you would automatically pick it up in the feedback sessions that things are not going well. And we feel that I think whatever we have reached here, we should continue. And customer means our business partners as well as our end customer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I think the core focus on making sure that there is transparency in the consumer process as well and that they feel heard is again a great cue and one that a lot of companies can learn from. So thanks for mentioning that, Kamesh. Further, you mentioned about the incredible team that goes behind building Digit, and of course, no company of this stature which has grown as fast as Digit has grown in an industry which is considered legacy is possible without a great team. So if you can perhaps share your thoughts around what do you look for when you're hiring and how has that evolved over time, right? Because I'm guessing at the initial days you need people who are pure hustlers, right? That's the that's the recipe that everybody talks about. But now that you're scaling into a large organization that is serving consequential number of consumers, how does your hiring policy perhaps or purview change, and what do you look for in talent when building out teams? Would be wonderful to hear, Kamesh.
So, Jibraj, one is that, as I said initially, we felt that we would need a diversified sort of a team.
Right.
People who come from core insurance background, people who have come from tech background, from consulting background, and then from this so-called e-commerce sort of a background. Because we felt that a combination of skills would actually be required. That I think worked well for us. Secondly, I think I was conscious that if we have to really build this company for the next 5-10 years in the first phase, we should also have our heads of various functions who typically should be 40 or below. So they also have a clear sort of a path. I think that worked really well. And then we obviously picked up a lot of youngsters fresh from colleges, automobile engineers, tech engineers, management trainees. A lot of them. We also run a program for students who come from underprivileged sort of a background. If they pass class 12, we take them as actually apprentices, and we train them in tech, etc. Pay them a salary, So we try and focus a lot on fresh recruitment. Obviously, you also take some people, especially in sales, etc., from the industry, from the market. So that was the initial phase. Now the phase which we have to work is more is towards looking at some sort of a skill set which could actually be important in the next 3 to 5 years, and ensure how do we really create a supply internally or and or externally for that sort of a skill set. Uh, so I think that would be maybe the second area for us to really work on, which I think is very critical. But I'm sure our HR colleagues and our team leaders will work on that. And last is that we try and give a lot of what should I say, freedom to people. Where, for example, I think one very critical cog in our structure is this location heads, people who heads various sales units in different locations. So we actually give huge amount of freedom to people at all levels, so that they can try and do business in their own way. And good thing is, I think a lot of them they work together on their own. Sales, actuarial, marketing colleagues, claims. They work together on their own, and one doesn't really need to interfere. I personally, I definitely have whatever expectations of where I see the business going. I try and share it with my colleagues, but I am not really someone who asks them every day what's happening, not happening.
Yeah.
Most of them, I would say, one would be, they would, if they want to talk, they will call. Otherwise, on my own, I'll probably be speaking once in 15, 20 days on my own.
Got it, got it. I think I love that, and that speaks volumes of the kind of leader you are. And I think, in fact, mentioning on that itself, considering that you've been in other organizations as a leader as well as an experienced professional, how do you think your role has evolved in Digit as a leader, right? Because as you mentioned, I'm guessing the early stages had a lot of you being hands-on, and currently you prefer being hands-off because you've empowered the team to get the work done, and that's how the org functions best. If you can talk to us about leadership lessons that you have taken up as a founder and how crucial that can be, especially for all young founders listening in, I think that would be super amazing, Kamesh.
So, Jivraj, I think in my case, I would say two things. One, I have always been very, very fortunate and lucky to have a great team around me. Almost all my life, working life, more than 30 years now.
Yeah.
Secondly, I have been frequently transferred in terms of assignments, type of business, countries, etc. So when you are actually in that sort of a situation, I have always been very conscious that no, this is something I don't know. And when you start with that, then you basically have to learn from the team first, and then you have to digest, and then maybe start sharing what you feel could actually be done. So I think that has been a bit of a learning. So in every new assignment, I try and learn as much as possible in the initial phases. You are always learning, but in initial phases, significantly more.
Yeah.
Secondly, I think I have always had also bosses most of the time who are happy to hear a honest sort of a feedback.
Okay.
So I think I also developed that sort of a culture where people can say what they feel like, because whatever way I was treated, and it was working well for me. So you follow the same, and it works well for the team.
Right.
And I would say, I think the last thing is that my sense is most people are hardworking, have a good attitude. I think the trouble in large organizations or even smaller organizations comes when atmosphere becomes political. When people have to actually, they get into this trip of trying to show that they're smartest in the room. They want to have the last word on everything which is being discussed. People will come and speak about somebody else behind their back. So I think if you can kill that sort of a culture right from the beginning by your own behavior to say, look, this is something which is not doable. My sense is everyone is actually happy in that. And in Digit, I think our head of the departments, as I said, typically and I'm sure there must be a sense of competition in terms of to learn something from the other, that somebody is good at that. But I have rarely come across situations where they are not able to coordinate with each other and they have to reach out to somebody else to say, look, we are not able to reach agreement, sort it out for us. I have rarely seen that. So I think this culture piece is very important. And a lot of times, if somebody like me, if you're conscious that you don't know anything, your team knows more than you. So if you start from a bit of a humility, then I think you're not insecure from that perspective. You share information with your team freely and stuff like that. And I've worked with people now from more than 20-25 countries in my various assignments. And this seemed to work everywhere.
Got it. No, I think that's awesome, because it goes back to the fundamentals. It's not very complicated. It goes back to being honest, being transparent, being direct, and avoiding the politics that may exist in an organization. But it's amazing to know that you've been so deliberate about it, and I think that is something that stands out, because I guess it could be very easy to forget this piece and build up the business, but I think I love the aspect that you've been very conscious about it. Another thing that
maybe let me just add two more points. Sorry to interrupt you.
For sure.
So one is that I think when you start creating bureaucracy around you, secretaries, executive assistants, and then people have to come prepared for some presentations. You don't want impromptu sort of discussions. That is where all this starts coming up. In my case, I don't have enough work. So obviously, I don't have a secretary. I don't have an executive assistant, because if I don't have enough work, what will I give it to them? So I think if you have this sort of a easy free access in our company, anyone can write an email to anyone. Nobody can come and say that, why did you write to this and this person? Nobody can do that. So I think when you try and create that sort of a culture, my sense is that people adapt to it very fast and everyone likes it. So I think it slowly and steadily, it becomes part of the organization's DNA. You don't really find anyone who says that, no, we should not allow people to write to anyone. We should filter this, we should filter that. And nobody does this.
No, I think that's great. I think as I mentioned, I think that's the brilliance in the simplicity, right? You're not wanting to create gates around you. You're trying to be as freely accessible as possible, and not just you. I mean, anybody in the organization.
All of them.
Exactly. And that speaks volumes of the culture of Digits. I think that's great for anybody listening in who aspires to build a company even bigger than Digit, for instance. So wonderful to hear that, Kamesh. I think another wonderful thing in the journey of Digit is the aspect around having great investors on board, right? And I'm guessing part of that comes from the previous network around what you had built in other companies, right? But talk to us about the importance of realizing that investors are not just a point in time, or just not just goals to achieve. They are there for the entire journey, and that is why it is very important to, I'm guessing, find the right set of people. So if you can talk to us about what it means to have the right set of backers for Digit Insurance as you build out a company for the next decade or two, and even a lifetime, that would be very helpful.
So, Jibrek, basically, I think here, first of all, I was, I would say, lucky, and Fairfax was really the early backer of Digit.
Yes.
And that was more in terms of, I would say, a bit of a relationship with Prem Vasa, their founder chairman. Plus, they are a very large investor in India, so they know the market well. They know this industry well, having been previously, promoter of ICICI Lombard. After that, actually, all our capital raises we did, we never appointed any investment banker. So, and I was completely new to this field because I used to work for Allianz and never had to go out to raise capital from investors. So Allianz was the big daddy who will always give you money when you needed it, was the situation.
Yeah.
So here, I think some friend or somebody will call you and say, look, you should meet so-and-so, you should meet so-and-so. And we started meeting people, some were friends whom one knew previously, or some were referred. And then slowly and steadily, one started exchanging as to what they are looking at and what you are looking at. And my sense is that here again, I find this very fascinating today, that most of the private equity firms, the good ones, or at least the ones we are dealing with, all of them have a fairly long sort of a time frame. So nobody is really looking at getting out tomorrow. Second, I think thing is that they want to understand the business, obviously, but they never, and they would ask questions in our quarterly results, etc., when we do a call, uh, or in between if they have something to check, but they never really try and second guess you. So they're generally very supportive. What also worked in our case, which I think is also very critical, which typically doesn't happen in most startups, in every round, our own people, our own team, colleagues, they actually invested. So close to, if I remember offhand, about $10 million of money actual cash has been invested by our own team. And when people would ask me, when do you want to get out, etc., I said, I hope I never get out of this. I'll work here till my health permits, and there's no reason for me to get out.
Yeah.
So I think when you actually have a team of people who are looking at the business in the long term, and every single PE investor told me that they have never heard of a company anywhere in the world where actually team is putting in cash. He says, we have heard about stock options, which obviously we have, but team isn't putting this. And again, here, this idea of actually putting in money, investment by team, did not come from me. It came from one of my my senior colleagues. And I said, why do you want to do this? You have options already. So he said, do you have a problem? It's my money. I said, no, I don't have a problem. And then we realized that people were so keen, and I think more than 100 people have actually invested.
Wow.
So I would say, I think you attract the sort of investors in the company, and I would say with the outlook in which they see the team really doing this.
Certainly.
So people feel that our team is really invested, not in terms of money, but really invested in building a company for the long term.
Yeah.
And that has helped. And I would say that in good times, you can take investors for granted. But when times change, and they do change, and they will change, I think you should treat any investor who gives you their cash very seriously.
Yeah.
And if there's a mismatch in terms of expectations on both sides, it's better not to go ahead, rather than spend time later trying to discuss the differences.
Yeah.
But there is a huge number of real good investors out there. So there's no real shortage. I think people are looking at building business for the long term. There are a lot of investors who will be with you throughout this journey.
Absolutely. I think that's very reassuring to hear, especially coming from you, and very refreshing to know all the things you mentioned about how employees of Digit have invested in the company, because that speaks volumes of what the kind of company you're building and the kind of people working. So I think that's phenomenal to hear, and something to look for as a benchmark for many young entrepreneurs. But going forward, one piece of the puzzle and business model that gets missed is the other stakeholders of the business, let's say distributors and other people who are involved, because we've spoken of the team, we've spoken of the product, we've spoken of the consumers. But if you can perhaps also tell us that as a founder and as somebody managing a large organization, how important is it to also focus on the other stakeholders, which are equally, if not more important? And how do you do that at Digit Insurance, considering that insurance has multiple parties to deal with before, which maybe the consumer cannot see, but the business definitely has to deal with?
So here, I think one is obviously the distributors who play a very critical role between the customer and the insurance company. Now, here, I think our entire business model is driven around partnerships. So our core philosophy is that how can we make the life of a distributor easier in terms of service and them not spending time in operational issues, less and less. So that I think is one piece. Second is we work with a lot of workshops, hospitals. So I think one has to manage those relationships, and obviously would have teams to manage that. Then you work with the loss assessors. These are the people who go out. These are independent people who go out and assess a loss. Now, they also play a very critical role because though they are independent, but when they go from an insurance company, from a customer, they see it as a representative of the insurance company itself. You have lawyers, you have investigators who do this.
Yeah.
So I think in any business, I would say the success is a sum total of efforts of all these people. I think on one side, I think this new culture of startups and all of that is really good and amazing. I think it's opened up huge opportunities. From my very limited perspective, I feel there's too much focus on the founder and one person. Uh, this is not really right because I feel that success is not only your own team, but all these people I mentioned. They have played a huge role in bringing at least Digit where it is. So, I think people, our admin colleagues, are people who have set up our offices, designed our offices, who take care of day-to-day requirements. Everyone plays a big role. So, my sense is that any business which actually does not make all these sort of stakeholders as part of the company in a positive way would not really be able to have the full impact which one intends to. And one thing also I would say, and as again from a limited perspective, is that there's too much focus on one person is very bad for the business, simply because until unless you are Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, etc., even Steve Jobs had guys like Tim Cook, but nobody else should have that sort of a thing where everything in the company revolves around one person, because that will lead to failure sooner or later.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think, just becoming dependable on one person is just like a recipe for failure. And it's just amazing to have that reiterated and echoed from you, because the importance of all stakeholders is important. And I mean, we may not be able to see it directly, but there are so many people contributing to it. So wonderful to hear that. This has been great, Kamesh. And I think as we move on to the end portions, I have one last question on, the company building journey, post which I'll move on to the last set of questions. But here, considering that you have the unique vantage point of growing profitably in a company that has, broken all records in terms of the growth aspect of it in the sector, right? Talk to us about the learnings maybe from scaling a company, because we understand that a lot has been said about how to establish 0 to 1 of a company. But once you have found that recipe that, okay, this is going to work, what do you do next to ensure sustained growth over week on week, month on month, year on year? Any lessons that you might have there would help a lot of mature founders who are looking to scale their companies in the country currently.
So it's a slightly difficult question to answer, Jivraj, but I would say the first thing in my view is that you have to scale up the business, scopes, scale everything first in your mind. Right. And then you should have a team which can also then scale it up in their mind. Absolutely. So the first requirement of any business to really grow and scale up is that is the team able to visualize that clearly. And if team can see that clearly, visualize, and not really get into one and then try to get into something else and then something else for growth. So I think having that sort of a clarity, focus, and that visualization is really important. That visualization should not change every 6 months when you think about a company. Second is, I think anything which one is building from an operational perspective, which could be tech, front end, back end, ability to handle claims, in our business, you have to really, really be focused on that. So like in Digit, we on a very regular basis project how many policies, claims we will have, how many calls could come to our call center, and how will we actually manage that, because you don't want service levels to drop. This typically people say that initially service level is good, but if you grow up, and this is continuously I used to hear from our business partners, and it is true, I have also seen it myself, that how do you really maintain services when you're scaling up? So I think having that some really great people in operations
Yes.
and tech who can actually manage this becomes very, very critical, including logistics. Where will people sit and whatever in different businesses? I'm talking more from a digits perspective. So I think that is really the second, and the third obviously is capital.
Mhm.
And in case of a capital, though it has been more like a free open tap for the last 5-7 years,
Yeah.
one should never ever take capital for granted also. That no, this so use capital with as much what should I say, with as much caution as possible. So that you should really value capital. Because
Absolutely.
the trouble is that today there might be 10 people who are ready to come and give you whatever capital you need. This can
Yeah.
dry up in 1, 2, 3 years at any point in time. And if you are too dependent on cash burn and things like that, it can come back and haunt you. Again, I'm talking more from a insurance perspective. I honestly don't
Absolutely.
understand the new business models at all. But I was saying it more. So we also take our investors very seriously. And for me, taking money, taking capital from investors is a responsibility. You
Yeah.
have to give them returns. So I would say these three things
Got it.
is what comes to my mind here.
Absolutely. No, I think the mind frame, handling the volume in terms of an operation standpoint and leveraging capital in a very conscious manner and in a very responsible manner, as you mentioned. I think all of those pointers are very helpful. Now, coming to the last segment, I mean, these are the series of questions that I ask each founder in some shape or form. And the first one there for you is, I think the role of serendipity in your life has played, a major role, because you mentioned that, you weren't supposed to land up at Stephens, but you ended up in somehow. Your insurance was also somehow serendipity for you. Talk to us about, what do you think is the difference between, let's say, luck and getting lucky, right? How do you think you've been able to do that in some shape or form, if at all? And just like reflecting upon your journey, what does serendipity mean for you? I think that would be just very interesting to hear.
So I think I genuinely believe that opportunities come by way of luck.
Mhm.
At least in my case, I can't think of any single opportunity, any step I took, which I took consciously. I think it came in my way. In reality, I want to do something different. But I think the question is when any new opportunity, any role change, any transfer has come, I've just taken it and try to learn from that.
Yeah.
So I try and which obviously exposed me, which I would say very few people would have been as fortunate as I have been to get exposed to the sort of financial services across the world the way I have been exposed. And secondly, I also try and read a lot. I think one of the biggest advantages which I've seen in the last 8-10 years, especially 10 years, is this no, you can even find these niche books, read about them, you can order them now. There's so much good stuff also happens on the internet. It's a bit difficult to find it at times. So I try and read a lot. So the way I see this is, if you feel that you try and learn at every opportunity, then we try and create a team around you which is better than what you are. So when an opportunity comes, I think it will work most of the time. If it doesn't work, which it doesn't work a lot of times also, then you learn from it and move on. I don't take myself from a perspective that no, I can't make a mistake or I can't fail, and no, it's like so. You just move on and try and learn from it. So I would say, um, somebody like me, I would say the sort of a learning I have had in the last 15, 20 years after I finished all those degrees. I'm not sure whether I really studied for them or not, but the real learning, I would say, happens. Whatever I learned in the first entire my schooling, college life, I would have learned more in the last 3 years. So I think we just forget that learning is also a very continuous process, and I have to consciously go after it.
Yeah.
Not just once you've finished MBA or law or whatever in your case or graduation, then you know this all. I think this is one should be very conscious about this, that learning is a continuous process. And the way the world is changing today, what we knew 3, 4, 5 years back, a lot of it might be relevant today.
Absolutely. No, I think as a youngster, I couldn't agree more. And I hope, all of us listening in can just follow through on these principles, because I just see and observe a pattern of just showing up, right? Like whatever life presents with you, if you can show up and, continue to learn and deliver, I think eventually the odds will be in favor of you, because that's what I think most people can falter on. But showing up and just learning is my cue there. And that's just wonderful to hear. For the second last question, I think one of the other things that stands out about you is the fact that you've been very ambitious, bold, confident, and to build something of this stature, of course, requires all of that traits. If you can perhaps, help us uh, with the kind of explain to us the kind of values that you have, right? What kind of characteristics that you portray, and how that has evolved from, let's say, the graduate from St. Stephen's to who you are right now. I think that would just help us grasp and learn from all of your experiences in a very, very sublime manner. So if you can talk to us about your principles, your values, and how you uphold them on a day-to-day basis, be it the ambition that you have, the confidence that you have, the 12, 14 hours of work that you want to do, the fact that you're coming, you're still so proactive about learning, all of that, if you can expand upon, that would be super awesome.
So, Jivaj, I think this is like, if we go back to our Indian culture in a way, so, if you read any of the philosophers, they say life is a journey in quest of knowledge. So we have been born in a country where we see this more as a journey. So I actually don't think this is actually anything extraordinary about that. I think the trouble is, and when I notice some people who are very promising, do well, and then suddenly, is that people start taking these designations and this very seriously. And if I may actually take 5 minutes and narrate an anecdote, this is with Mr. Arun Shori, who obviously is. I knew his father, and from the father I came to know his son, which is Mr. Arun Shori. And then after he left government, I think prior to his being in government, and after that I have interacted with him, not when he was in government or in politics. And one day he was telling me about his father, whom I knew well in a way, Mr. H.D. Shori. And he says my father was an additional secretary or something, he retired. And he says next day he would drive his car and he started fighting for people in the court through this organization called Common Cause. And I think one single organization has helped the largest number of people through court cases would be Common Cause. And he says because his father used to say that you should never become a designation. And then Mr. Shori asked me 3 questions, which are very interesting, long time back. And I'm talking about 2010 now. So he says that when somebody asks you, who are you? So at that time, I was CEO of an insurance company. So I said, okay, I'm Kamesh Goyal. No, I'm CEO of this in this company. And so he says, but where is the need? So he says, let people say, who are you? Introduce. He says, I'm Kamesh Goyal. So tell me a bit about yourself. You can say, I'm married, I have 2 children. I work in this insurance company, or I work in insurance. Let the guy say, okay, which insurance company, what position? And he says, Kamesh, try this. Out of 10 people, 9 people will not ask the third question at all. And he says, and it happened with me. I actually did this. Only one guy who happened to be in the insurance industry outside India, he actually said, okay, which insurance company, what position? Yes. And he says, don't become designation. He said, even today you will meet people who will say, I'm ex-general manager, I'm ex-chairman, I'm ex-secretary, I'm ex-that. He says, don't become designations. So my people have, my sense is that a lot of people become designations even in their own working life. And once you reach a certain position, then you feel you have arrived in life, you know everything. And that is where I guess that sort of a downturn really starts.
Yeah.
And all this, I think, media related love or this importance, etc. As long as we realize that all this is actually for the position, not for you personally,
Yeah.
for most of us, especially for people like me, uh, you would actually focus on basic stuff, which is try and learn and try to become a better human being. And having
Yeah.
crossed 50, as I said, no, in our culture, this is the time to do a bit of a self-reflection, try and improve yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think if we stick to whatever we have learned from our parents, from their generation, because this is how our culture is.
Yeah.
So I think if we stay closer to that, I'm sure we'll have the right value system.
Absolutely. I think that's wonderful and a lot of great food for thought for everyone. I think what I'm taking back is it's just so important to not chase, I think, external titles and just like, motivations need to be very pure, because if you're following and chasing titles, you'll never get enough of it and you'll just piggyback on top of like external things. But I think it's the internal drive that matters more. And I think I love that. And in fact, I think that would be a wonderful close to the conversation, wherein if you can talk to us about your motivation, right? So one, we understand that you want to learn, you want to keep growing, and you'll show up consistently day in day out because that's what matters to you and you enjoy doing it a lot. But if we were to ask you what your primary motivation to build digit insurance is, to build a large company and to actually serve millions of consumers, I think that would resonate a lot with every young builder out there. And that would be a great close to the conversation. So what is your eventual motivation to do all of this and build a long-standing organization is my
Sure.
last one.
So before Jivraj, I answer that, let me just also say that no, I have also chased titles and all of that, cars, this,
Mhm.
that. I think but after certain each age and stage, you have
Mhm.
to try and define yourself in a better way.
Got it.
So
Fair
I
enough.
have gone through that whole cycle, and now
Yes,
I'm in a different sort of a stage in age in life. So
absolutely.
I just wanted to clarify that I don't want to come like some sort of a saint here. I have had all
Yes.
sorts of no those things, but as I said, we have to redefine and reinvent ourselves every 5-10 years. So
Yeah,
that is what I actually meant there. Just to be sure. I think in
absolutely.
case of a digit, size is important. But if I think purely from a perspective of where it should be, I would say we have to, our values essentially are, one is transparency and second is challenge the status quo. So can we continuously come out with some innovation in product or process which make lives of our customers and our partners easier? So I would say that is one. Secondly, can we make Digit as a place where people can come and find, as employees, their true potential? Because I think for all of us as individuals, the most satisfying thing is if we feel we can achieve our best in an organization. So I would say that is the second thing. And then the third is people who have given us money. They feel that no, it has been a good investment, whether in terms of impact on society, in terms of returns, or a combination of all of that. So my sense is that if we stay true to this values of Digit, uh, size, growth, expansion, all of that will happen. We'll still go through some bad times. Life is a roller coaster. You'll go through some bad times. You'll go through some great times. But overall, over a period of time, I would say that no, you will only grow.
Yes.
But if we don't stick to the value system,
Mhm.
then the long term, I would say, you could survive, do well for some time, but the long term consequences will not really be great. There are not many organizations, and whether we look at BSC, Sensex, or NSC, or Dow Jones, anywhere, most of these companies vanish.
Yeah.
Two-thirds of the companies vanish after every 25, 30 years, from the index. So change is a constant in life. So I think we should stay constant, true to our values, and I'm sure things should be fine.
Absolutely. That's wonderful and a great way to end what has been a sublime conversation. I certainly have learned so much in terms of just staying true to our value system, following the basics and showing up day in, day out to actually, go towards your value and defining yourself better. So I think those are my takeaways. Thank you so much, Kamesh, for a wonderful chat. I learned a lot and I hope you enjoyed this as well.
Thanks a lot, Jupiter. Thanks for having me.